Okay. Alright, so, alright, again, this is Romans. It's called Romans because this is Paul's letter to the house of Israel that is scattered in Rome. Okay, but anyway, let's go on. Chapter 11, starting verse 16. For if the first fruit be holy, the lump is holy. If the root be holy, so are the branches. And if some of the branches be broken off, and you being a wild olive tree were grafted in among them, and with them partake of the root and fatness of the olive tree. Okay, so this grafting in, that I always hear grafting in, the grafting in of the Gentiles, we're grafting in. Okay, this is something that Paul only mentions one time. You make a whole doctrine out of it. Okay, but anyway, we have to deal with it.
And the doctrine they make out of it does not line up with,
Right. So again, we see holy, holy, holy. All right? Holy means what? Set apart. Who is set apart out of all the nations? Israel. Israel is the only set apart nation. All right? So already when you have holy, 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 and it's talking about people, we already know that it's not talking about foreigners. It's talking about Israelites. So the branches he's talking about are what? Israelite branches. But let's get into this. All right, I highlighted wild. All right, you being a wild olive tree. Why is it
still an olive tree?
It's still an olive tree. Okay?
It didn't say wild oak.
Okay, exactly. Israel is a seed. It's a family. All right, so he's not grafting in an orange branches. He's not grafting in cherry branches. He's not grafting in apple branches. Those are different seeds. All right, he's grafting in an olive tree.
And then we also gotta go back and bring it up again that these other nations were never ever. You can't find one scripture where these other nations were forbidden from coming and joining themselves to us.
So they wouldn't need to be grafted.
Yeah. There was no need for foreigners to be grafted in.
Because they never got broke off. Because they I mean, or for another nation to be outside of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, because we saw that from the beginning in Exodus that there's one Torah, both for the native born and for the foreigner. We also saw in the New Testament that the Jews did associate with foreign converts. So, again, it would not make sense for Paul to be talking about this now, when this would be already old news already. Okay? All right? Being a wild olive tree. Why is it wild? Why? Because it has not been tamed by the Torah. These are Israelites of the northern kingdom, the house of Israel, and they have been broken off from the covenant. So they are following Greek customs. They're speaking Greek language. They're not following the Torah for the most part. Okay? That's why they're wild. That's why it's a wild olive tree. Okay? Verse 18. Boast not against the branches, but if you boast, you bear not the root, but the root you. You will say then, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief they were broken off. You stand by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. Okay. So, some branches were broken off what? The house of Judah. Because of what? Because of unbelief. We saw that when Yahushua came, some Jews believed, some did not believe. And those are the branches that are broken off. All right? So this is not the whole nation of Israel. It's talking about the house of Judah. Right? For if Elohim spared not the natural branches, take heed lest he spare not you. Behold, therefore, the goodness and severity of Elohim, on which on them which fell severity, talking about the house of Judah, but you goodness, talking about the house of Israel. If you continue in his goodness, otherwise you shall be cut off. Okay.
So that's like one of the parts where they say the natural branches. They saying, they say that's Israel, and those were, off and then they get grafted in or whatever. But the other part, what I was wondering was about the boast part. So who he's telling not to boast? He's telling Judah.
He's telling Israel not to boast. The house of Israel not to boast.
Okay. Israel not to boast.
Okay. And we'll get into that. We'll see furthermore that, natural branches, because what? The house of Judah was
a natural branch. They never went wild.
Right. They were following the Torah.
Mm-hmm. And just to kind of, something that I watched a video on, I think a while back, was, or there was a lesson on actual grafting in of a true tree branch, how it works, how similar the parts have to be, and all this stuff. It gives you a heavy understanding of, it's like a perfect analogy, you know what I'm saying?
Right. And a lot of the stuff that we really don't get because we are cut off from
nature.
Okay.
A lot of the parables that even the Messiah used had to do with nature.
So we understand nature, we'll get it even like
right.
quicker.
Yeah, like including herding sheep and stuff like that.
Right.
The behavior of sheep.
Right.
Like I watched some videos on how sheep just are just pure followers, man. So.
Okay. Verse 23. And they also, if they abide not still in unbelief, shall be grafted in, for Elohim is able to graft them in again. So talking about the house of Judah. If they turn from their unbelief, they'll be grafted back in. All right? For if you were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, talking about didn't have the Torah, and were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall these, which be the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? All right, so the natural branches being the branches that were following Torah, which was the house of Judah. Okay. So let's get the precept of where Paul is drawing this olive tree from. He's not, all right, Paul's not writing in a vacuum. He's pulling this from a source. So let's look at the source material, right? So let's go to Jeremiah chapter 2, starting in verse 20. For of old time I have broken your yoke and burst your bands, and you said, I will not transgress. When upon every high hill and under every green tree you wanderest, playing the harlot. So this is talking about the house of Israel. Yet I have planted you a noble vine, wholly a right seed. How then are you turned into a degenerate plant of a strange vine unto me? All right, so he's talking about the house of Israel as a what? A plant. Okay, so we're getting the source material, right? All right, let's get into the meat of it. Jeremiah chapter 11, starting in verse 16. Yahuwah called your name a green olive tree, fair and of goodly fruit. With the noise of great tumult, he has kindled fire upon it, and the branches of it are broken. Okay, so who is he talking about? Who is he talking about? Verse 17. For Yahuwah of hosts, Yahuwah Zabaoth, that planted you, has pronounced evil against you for the evil of the house of Israel and of the house of Judah, which they have done against themselves to provoke me to anger in offering incense unto Baal. So who's the olive tree? The house of Israel and the house of Judah. The branches are broken off. It's here in Jeremiah. This is what Paul is pulling from. So the branches that were broken off the house of Israel were grafted into the house of Judah. Why? Because the house of Judah still had the covenant, while the house of Israel was divorced. The house of Judah never received a divorce, so they continued in the covenant. So the house of Israel had to be grafted in to the house of Judah. That's why the prophets talk about the two sticks becoming one. So we got the understanding. This is the source material where Paul is pulling from. Again, last week we looked at a lot of excerpts from the letters of Paul where he's actually quoting the prophets. And the quotes that he's pulling from pertain to the house of Israel. But if you don't know that, if you don't go back to the source material, you don't know what Paul is talking about. And you think it's just everybody. It's not just everybody. Okay? But that's why Paul wrote in his own letters, he said, I speak to those who know the law. So if you don't know the law, you shouldn't even be reading his letters.
You shouldn't even be looking at it. And of course, they wrestle
but then
with
you
it.
say the law done with it. So you don't know the law, but then you go to Paul who say you shouldn't be reading it because you don't
know the law.
So it's like just a big contradiction of what they believe in.
Okay. Isaiah 60 verse 21. Your people shall be all righteous. They shall inherit the land forever. Talking future tense. The branch of my planting, the work of my hands, that I may be glorified. Again, we talked about, we already saw that. It was Israel that Yahuwah planted. Okay. All right. So we're still on this olive tree. I'm just going to keep hacking at it. All right. John 15. This is Yahusha speaking. I am the true vine, and my Father is a husbandman. All right. Husbandman means gardener. Okay. Every branch in me that bears not fruit, he takes away. So those are the branches that are what? Broken off. And every branch that bears fruit, he purges or he prunes, that it may bring forth more fruit. Now you are clean through the word which I have spoken unto you. All right. So which branch are broken off? The ones that don't bear fruit. All right. What are fruit? Doing the Torah. That's the fruit. Okay. Verse 4. Abide in me and I in you. As a branch cannot bear fruit of itself except it abide in the vine, no more can you except you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Who is he talking to? Is he talking to everybody in the world?
Israel.
He's talking to the Jews. That's his audience. He's in Judea talking to the Jews. Or he's talking to the Yahudim. You are the branches. He that abides in me, and I in him, the same brings forth much fruit. For without me, you can do nothing. Okay? Verse 6. If a man abide not in me, he is cast forth as a branch. He's broken off, and is withered, and men gather them, and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me, and my words in you, you shall ask what you will, and it shall be done unto you. Herein is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit. So shall you be my disciples. Okay. So the whole thing is what? To walk as Yahushua walked. To do his works. To fulfill. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please click the like button and subscribe and be notified of future videos. Shalom, family.